Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Chase Jarvis. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. You know the show. This is where I sit down with the world's top creators, thought leaders, and people who are generally helpful to helping you live your dreams in career, hobby, and life. My guest today is someone you will know. She's the co-founder and executive creative director. This is a mouthful. Executive creative director and co-founder, of course, of Refinery 29, Piera Gelardi. Yay!
That's me.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
This is a long time coming. I have been following your career, following Refinery 29. I feel like we're on the, if the last 10,000 years has been way too much about men, I think the future has an amazing feminine quality to it. I can see it emerging in popular culture. I think you are a champion, a leader in that world. Was this intentional, or is this, you're just following your intuition, and here we are, you have this insanely successful site, a career built on supporting, driving the world of feminism. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was intentional and intuition, kind of a mix of both, which I think is sort of a theme throughout my career in life. But yeah, I grew up with feminist parents. My mom was someone that really wanted to raise me with feminist values. And
that radical notion that all humans are equal?
Yeah, that all humans are equal, that me and my brother were equal, that I should, have the opportunity to choose things in my life and not, have it be assumed that, I would follow a stereotypical path. And so, yeah, it was, I was raised that way, like, going to pro-choice rallies and reading feminist literature and, my mom would, read us feminist fairy tales when we were going to bed because she wanted, both my brother and I to have examples of fierce female protagonists. So I grew up with that, and that was always kind of ingrained in who I was. And then as I started to, grow in my life, that was something, just a part of me that I really identified with. But it almost, because I was raised with it, it almost wasn't so much in my consciousness as like
and that's, I want to make sure that, I'm not like trying to overly frame that. And I think it's just a piece of your DNA that I find, as someone who's read a lot about you and followed the story of you in Refinery 29, it's a piece of that. The DNA, it seems like. I was just wondering, what the basis was, and you were raised with it clearly.
Yeah.
And how have you imported that into Refinery 29?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a piece of my DNA. So yeah, like, because it's just how I was raised, and something that didn't seem out of the ordinary to me.
It wasn't a thing that you went to the store and got and then said, we're going to put this into our thing.
Yeah, it's like now when I think back and I have the perspective to realize like that my mom, and I've talked to my mom about those choices that she made, the fact that she sought out those specific, types of books and, like in order to be the type of mom that she wanted to be. I think, now I have the perspective to realize it, but then I didn't quite realize it. But it was something I always gravitated towards. Like as a teenager, I loved Sassy Magazine and Bikini Kill, and I was just really drawn to sort of publications and culture that celebrated iconoclastic, powerful women who were, really doing their own thing, and that had, spunk and courage and an exuberance to them. So that always inspired me, and I think also moving to New York, I grew up in this small town in Maine, and it was it was pretty homogenous in terms of culture and style and all these different things.
Yeah.
So coming to New York, I was completely in awe of just, I mean, I remember my first time going,
this place.
Yeah, I remember my first time going to Coney Island. I was like, this is the most beautiful place in the world. Just because of the incredible, mix of cultures and style. And to me, that's just so fascinating and gorgeous. And so yeah, when we were starting Refinery 29, we wanted to celebrate personal style. We felt like I've never been, what I think of as a fashion person. I never really identified in that way, but I always valued style as a form of self-expression. And I always admired people that express themselves that way, that were so confident in their own skin that they could kind of have that expression. And that's something that goes, way back to the, in humanity, is like adorning your body and, using makeup and clothing to express something. So I loved that about style, but I felt alienated by a lot of fashion publications and fashion
mainstream
brands and advertising, because it just felt, it was serving up this really narrow lens of what beauty looked like. It was sort of like everyone should aspire to be tall, thin, white, and rich. And I was like, that's boring. And it, and also kind of designed to make you feel bad about yourself. Like you need these things to be filled, to change you. So we started Refinery 29 to celebrate personal style. We were really inspired by all these different independent boutiques that we were seeing around us in New York, that had a really unique perspective on what style was, and that had totally different communities of style. Like you had Lyle in Nolita, that was all kind of like 20s, 30s, 40s vintage inspired, and there were all these amazing like retro women that were wearing that, and they had their own unique style, to like A-Life in the Lower East Side, which was much more of they were more celebrating like street culture and sneakers, and they had their whole own community around them, and having performances in their backyard. And so we loved just seeing all these communities of style that were really different, but that were an expression of more than just what you put on your body. They were an expression of different ways of kind of curating your life and different interests, and so it was much more a cultural look at what style was. So that's how we started Refinery 29, and I think that emphasis on individuality, celebrating more the personal style of fashion, that grew. And actually in the beginning we were unisex. We wanted to we were focusing on both men's and women's. We had a really unisex aesthetic, and over not that much time, but over I think 2 years, we decided to focus on women. We felt like there was more of an opportunity there. There was more interest from women, and we felt like the gap between what we wanted to create and what the women's media and fashion media was making was a bigger opportunity. It was a big opportunity. It was just what we were doing felt really different and really exciting to us, and we just saw a lot of opportunity to change the way women were represented, to change the idea of what women should aspire to. Because my parents, and the way I grew up, it was like always about aspiring to be kind of the best version of yourself, and to continue to learn and grow and be curious and develop your interests. And I was like, why would I aspire to just copy this cookie cutter thing, and and that's not representative of what I think is like most beautiful in life and in culture. So
obviously you have done an amazing job of creating the thing that you just described. For the folks at home, I don't know anyone who's not really familiar with Refinery 29. You're such a iconic brand in media now. You guys have done an amazing job breaking through. But as an audience of creators and builders and makers and doers and entrepreneurs, I think a lot of folks,
AKA our tribe.
Yeah, that's right. Our homies, AKA our homies. When this was true for myself a long time ago, I feel like I know differently now. But there's a lot of folks at home who are like, wow, like I can't even take the first step because there are things like Refinery 29 that have done it already. I know just enough about your founding story to be dangerous, but not enough to tell the people. And besides, they'd want to hear it from you. So give us a little with the goal of helping people understand that we didn't have it figured out, that we didn't have any money, we didn't have, it was more like ready, fire, aim as opposed to the other way around. So can you give us a little insight into that? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that taking that first step can be so daunting. And I certainly would have been absolutely terrified if it was like, I thought I was taking the first step to create a company that spoke to hundreds of millions of people every day, had 500 people on staff. Like I would just, I just would have, I don't think I would have taken that step because it would just seem so terrifying. And I'd be like, I'm 23 years old. What do I know about building a business of that size? But I think because it's like you just take the first step. You don't have to like go 12 years into the future and do this thing just yet. So I think because we built it slowly over time, it was it's not as daunting. I mean, because when we started it, as I said, we were inspired by all these independent boutiques in New York. And we launched actually with this, what looked like a really cool interactive mall map of the 29 best stores in New York. And you could kind of browse them and learn more about them. We did a lot of street style with people, the different communities of people that went to those places. But it was, it wasn't like this big revelatory thing when it launched. It was cool, it was unique, but where we've taken it is to this whole other place where now we have so many different realms of what we're doing. We're creating 200 plus stories a day across all these different platforms.
200?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh
we have a short film series that we've been doing with different women directors. We have live events that we do, like this event 29 Rooms.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Kind of huge, ambitious project, but so where it started to where it is so vastly evolved. But I think as you're creating, you start to see these new steps. So, I think what's interesting to me is when we started, I saw opportunity, but it was kind of like right here.
Yeah.
And then as you start to build, the window and the vision that you have gets bigger and bigger. So now I feel like where we're at is just the tip of the iceberg, because once you start to grow and
it's
see,
like unlocking levels in a video game.
Yeah, totally.
Like, oh my God, there's a whole other world over here.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's super refreshing. Can you talk a little bit about the tactics, like this? Like I heard you had $5,000 or something like that, and then
I only half answered your question. I answered like the second part for the audience.
No, it's cool, and that's I think
Yeah.
that's the part that is the dreamer part, and you have to have dreams before you put tactics in place.
Yeah.
But it's
Sure.
important for I think the folks at home to understand that there was a time when you didn't know when your next dollar was going to come from, and you didn't know if it was going to work, and maybe it's just for your homies, and it wasn't for 500 million people. So can you take us back to the mindset and the actual, what you had or what you didn't have?
I definitely can. Step into my time machine.
To go back.
So we started, we launched it. I have three co-founders, Philip, Justin, and Christine. Philip and Justin had the original idea for Refinery 29. I basically started doing it as my side hustle, kind of as a friend consultant.
Yep.
And Philip at the time was my boyfriend, is now my husband of 12 years. And
Congratulations.
Justin was his friend from high school. And then Christine had been my boss at a magazine that I had worked at before starting Refinery. So, we started the company with this map, and we.
You built the website yourself?
I had a friend who I had,
There you go. It's unfolding, right?
Yeah,
the friend's like, hey, can you help me with this thing?
I had a friend that I worked with a lot at the magazine that I had been at previously, who was, my age, and. So asked her and her company, she had a small company, to do the logo and design the website. Through her, found a developer to launch it. And we launched it. To kind of start the company, Philip and Justin actually, through friends and family, scrummaged together $5,000, which was how we started the business. And we started it, very scrappy. I still was working at the magazine when we first started, and I would basically, just be up really late at night working on it. Would spend the weekends going store to store, photographing and taking street style and product pictures and all this stuff. And then, after some time, I quit my job, but I still did freelance for, I think, almost a year and a half.
This is important too.
Yeah. I did freelance for a year and a half. I would basically do any thing that came to me that sort of allowed me to just go, like it was like a day rate situation. So anything where I didn't have to think about it before or after, just go, do the job, and then get out. So I did a lot of like production assisting, styling assisting, some like random illustration jobs, just really anything that was like fixed so that I could use most of my brain, like my active brain power on creating the company. But that was how we got it started. We bootstrapped it 100%, used our office as our headquarters.
Your everything, right? Your world headquarters.
Yeah, it's actually so funny because sometimes I think back and like I remember that Justin, our partner and co-founder, would come over, and of course Philip and I lived together because we're married. So he would come over and like sometimes I remember once like we like decided at lunch I had leftover risotto and we just like fried up some arancini. And like it's so funny for me to think about this now. Like I'm like, what were we doing? And also the funny thing to me is that I felt so overwhelmed and so busy back then.
Yeah.
And now when I think about it, I was like, why did I, what was I doing that like made me feel that way? Because it, when in perspective, it feels like it was, just this totally different level. But yeah, we bootstrapped it. And I think what helped us to be successful was having, a unique and differentiated point of view. And a lot of people told us we would never be successful because we were focusing on these independent brands that didn't have a lot of marketing budgets. They weren't, global conglomerates. But actually that was an advantage for us because, we were too small to work with the Gap, we had a small niche dedicated audience that really cared about what we were doing. And actually those small brands that everyone said would be our downfall it was a self-supporting community. Oak in Brooklyn was our first advertiser for a whopping $1,000. And then, after a couple of years, Stephen Allen, who owns stores kind of all over the world now, although he was a more New York focused retailer then, he was our first investor. So that community helped support us as we grew.
Okay, so many things you just said. I want to deconstruct them because it's
Let's pick things apart.
Let's pick them apart. So, in particular is which one of those things should I go into first? I guess, there's so many layers. I think let's go to the part where you transition into this career that was something that you really wanted. I think there's a cultural narrative that's like, you're an entrepreneur, you go all in, you just push your chips in and you jump off the bridge. And I don't, like, the people that I know who are the most successful entrepreneurs, none of them did that.
Right.
Are you committed? Yes. But is there things like, or are there things like rent and food, and that if you can't provide for yourself, that's going to cause real problems? And I think that segue, that transition from you and your magazine job into living your dream career, to me that's a massive black hole for so many people who want to get started. So give me a little bit, like, you talked about doing things that didn't suck up all your time. To me, that's a big thing, because people are like, I have my full-time job, and then between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m., that's where I'm doing my thing, the classic side hustle, which I'm not against that. But I think you're like constraining the other things is massively important, and it's a gap. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think it depends what your job is. I mean, my job at the magazine was a great job. It was very creative. I love the people that I worked with, and it was creatively rewarding because I had a lot of freedom. It was a really interesting place, and I learned a lot there. However, my like entrepreneurial roots and just my, I guess, fierce independence made me want to do my own thing. But I'm also someone that like I was like all in at that magazine job. It wasn't my company, but I was all in. And that's sort of just my personality. It's like I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to give it my all. So for me, when we started the company, I was doing it. Like I was doing it at nights and weekends, and was having some success at doing that. But it was just really hard for me to think bigger about it because of knowing, just still having the creative energy going into my job. Yeah. So I think some people who are really great at kind of like compartmentalizing and are really disciplined can handle doing a side hustle with a full-time job, and like I'm kudos to them, and I think they're amazing. That's just not how my brain works. So I had to I knew that if I wanted to pursue refinery and building it, and taking a real shot at starting my own thing, that I was going to need to like leave the magazine. But I, financially, I couldn't just, quit and be like, okay, now I'm doing this thing that doesn't pay me any money. So yeah, it helped to just find, I think, what within whatever career you're in, because I was a photo director at a magazine, which involved, production and art direction. Yep. I was involved in styling. I was able to kind of transition that into these different smaller freelance gigs that paid, that had decent day rates. And it was actually amazing, like year and a half or 2 years. Our fashion director from the magazine had also gone freelance. And so he was my savior. Like he kept booking me on these different jobs that he was doing. Yeah. So I would assist him, and styling assisting is like, it's like $250 a day. Yep. But sometimes on commercial jobs I would get $500 a day, which was awesome. And yeah, it just involves like, it's so compartmentalized. Yeah. Like you're there, you're doing the job, you're focused on it, and then when you leave,
it's amazing.
It's done. You just have to invoice.
Yeah, but it's amazing to me how that act of compartmentalizing frees you up. Yeah. And I think you don't want to have that as a career. Some people do. They want to go. They want to have their 9 to 5, and then when they get off, they're off. I respect people for that, but that's not really the entrepreneurial spirit. Most of the folks that I know don't have that compartmentalization. Yeah. They're sort of all in, and it's to me, having done exactly the same thing that you're talking about, but with sort of waiting tables, and it was because I couldn't get work in photography. I didn't know any photographers to start out. That little missing piece of how do you compartmentalize it, because the 10-hour day is a long grind, and it's anything else, you got to commute, and then how much energy. And the reality is, if you want to change your life, you have to put the time in. But the simple act of how much do I need to make every month? How can I compartmentalize it? Go to work, do my thing, get paid, and get the hell out of there and get back to dreaming and doing the thing that you care about. Massive. I think that's a powerful insight. So that was one of the things I wanted to deconstruct. Another one is that you didn't have, like, you did all of the jobs. Like you talked about doing so many of the things at your new magazine, and creating community and bringing in your friends. And how important was that to getting the business off the ground?
I mean, I think it was really critical. In order to launch our business, I had to learn so many things that I didn't know. Like I learned Google Analytics, so I could send send traffic reports and understand what people were reading and what they were engaging with and what they were interested in.
But you were creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
But this I don't know.
I'm not like a. I think that idea of like the creative.
Thank you for blowing this up. I can see where you're going. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of this like monolithic, like glowing creative that has all the big ideas but doesn't have to get in the weeds.
There's no shovels or it's bullshit.
I just think it's bullshit. I mean, I think from multiple levels. I mean, I think that being. And from my experience, and I know we have so many stories in our culture that are about things just popping off, and these overnight successes. I mean, it took us 8 years to be an overnight success. We always joke that that's the case, and it took so much hard work, having to do so many different things that were outside of my job description. Not that I've ever really had a job description, but and I think that also that idea of that monolithic creative is really antiquated, because I think for me, being creatively successful is about community. It's about listening to many different people's ideas. It's about not having to be the loudest voice in the room, but actually being the one with the antennas up, with
best ears.
with the best ears, with the that's like connecting the dots and what people are saying and attuned to other people. So I think that idea is to me not one that I resonate with. And I do wonder if that's because that's the general idea of the creative or the creative director. I sometimes wonder if that's why only 4% of creative directors are women, because people have this just antiquated and different idea of what it means. Anyway, but going back to your question, I think as we grew, it's really been about learning different skills and taking on different things, and like the four of us used to joke, like at Refinery 29, no job is too small. As Philip and Justin went to they almost got crushed by an air conditioner that they bought. They had to buy off Craigslist for our office because that's the one that we could afford.
Yep.
Or we're lugging the trash out of the office at night. It's just all these things are you just kind of figure out how to do it and you do it
very unsexy.
I guess I think it's sexy.
Good. I love that answer. That's a great reframing.
I don't know. It's like
work is sexy.
I've always thought work was sexy. I mean, that's also just to go back to my background, I grew up in a family business. Everyone always sort of worked in some capacity of the family business, and I just felt like everyone in my family was always collaborating on stuff, and so I always thought work was very exciting, very sexy. I had a job from a very young age, and I don't know.
Let's put a pin in that for a second, because before the cameras start rolling, we were talking a little bit about each of our backgrounds, and you came from an entrepreneurial family, and at one time your father had the largest business in Maine, and they experienced some problems.
Yeah.
And did that background and your life in that family, how did it prepare you for what you're doing now? And is having that background required for someone?
No.
Okay, so give us a little bit of backstory and how you've applied some of those lessons to your career arc as a creator and as an entrepreneur.
I mean, I think I'm going to answer the question, I promise.
Okay.
But I'm going to have a slight non sequitur first.
Great, let's do it.
Yes.
Anywhere you want to go.
No, I think that looking, it's great to look to people for inspiration and to, glean ideas and confidence from seeing, people, other people's stories of success or failure or whatever. But I think that thinking that there's one way of doing things, or that there's one path to a desired outcome, is totally erroneous, and everyone can find their own path. I don't think my path to what I am doing is totally, even though I came from an entrepreneurial background, it's not a linear path, and it really is, I think you are the most successful when you kind of find your own strengths, you create your own story, and you're not trying to model yourself completely off of someone else's success. I think it's just so important to know what success looks like for you, and to, really create that from the place of your background, your interests, your skills. So you don't have to have the same background as me to do something similar to what I do.
Awesome. I had coffee with James Victori. I don't know if you know James, is an amazing designer. He's got some stuff in the MoMA. He's been on the show. The things that made you weird as a kid will make you great as a creator and entrepreneur.
Yes.
So sort of lean into those things.
Lean into what makes you you. I think that's something that I've learned again and again over time, and something I definitely suggest that people think about. So growing up, I grew up, my dad and his brother had a business called Shape, and it was a manufacturing business, manufacturing CDs, VHS cassettes. In the 80s.
Oh, in the 80s.
In the 80s, when those things,
a money factory.
When those things were, all the rage.
Yes.
But they were very innovative in technology, engineering, and manufacturing. and they had a big business. So I grew up like putting on my little like clean.
Going to the factory?
Yeah, going to the factory with the little hoodie and the booties. Yeah, and like, you know, I would get all the rejected CDs, and my cousins and I would make like armor and jewelry out of them. And but yeah, so I grew up with, you know, him and his brother having this business, and my mom worked in the business. My aunt worked in the business. My cousins would come for the summer and work at Shape.
Oh, wow.
My brother and I worked at Shape at different points. So I think just seeing that was, you know, and it was always blending. Like they would, because we lived in Maine and they had, you know, clients from all over, they would actually use that as an advantage and have, you know, business clients come, and so we would have like these clam bakes like multiple nights a week for my dad's clients.
Nice.
So just kind of like
coastal Maine. There you go.
You know, they had to like lure them in, because it was like, wait, we're going for a business meeting in Maine. So he had this successful business, but then from a couple of different things happened, from manufacturing starting to move to China. You know, the cost, I forget, the cost of one of the plastics that they used went way up, and they had a bad investor that, you know, through the series of all these things, they ended up going bankrupt. My dad got fired from his own business.
Oh my God.
And it was, you know, also they were like a Cinderella story in the press, because they both came from working class background, you know, military family. And they completely built this thing from the ground up.
Yeah.
But then, you know, then it was like the downfall, because everyone loves to build them up and then tear them down.
Yeah. We have a cultural
which is
thing
unfortunate aspect of our culture. So yeah, I saw that happen. But I think it was, you know, I just think it was such an amazing foundational thing to see. I think it's kind of had two effects. One is that I have a healthy dose of paranoia, and not in a bad way. I think it's just an awareness that
all this could go away.
Yeah, that everything can go away, and that's actually okay.
Yeah.
But that it's, you know, important to never get too comfortable or confident in what you're doing. Like knowing that the industry is always changing, that the factors at play can always shift. But you know, being aware of those things can help you to avoid them sideswiping you. So that's something that definitely I took away from it. But also it's just amazing to see, you know, that was really challenging for my dad. It's still something that, you know, we talk about a lot. But it changed his life in so many different ways. Like I feel like he actually, it taught him a lot more about what was important to him. And he's just, like, I think he's a better person for it. So to me, it also just makes it okay that can happen. It makes it like, it makes me grateful in the moment to just like, to recognize, okay, like right now things are really great, and I'm truly grateful for that. And if things change, that's okay too. And I know that if
you're adaptable, or that you can solve problems.
Like he never reached that same level of, you know, that's the thing I think also about success is, and knowing what's successful to you, because he never had a company that size, again, that scale. But he's had, you know, maintained his passion. He's had a lot of other businesses. He's become so much more, like, since that point, he became so much more involved in our family's life, and that's something that has given him so much joy. So I think seeing that and realizing that success doesn't have to mean having this
the biggest company in Maine, right?
Crazy thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, sometimes people ask me, like, you know, when did you become successful, or when did you feel like you'd really like made it? And the funny thing is, like, when we launched that little map, and, you know, 500 people came to the site, like I was high-fiving. We got, you know, we went out for pizza. We were like, this is awesome, and I felt successful. Yep. So I think I forget who said this, but I think about it a lot, which is that comparison is the killer of joy. So I just think about that a lot because it really is about knowing what success looks like to you, what like fulfillment is for you, and not feeling like you have to model that off of something else that exists in the world.
That is a beautiful segue to what I'd like to shift gears to now. Nice, perfect. Of course. Let's go to a little bit more philosophical place around the mission and focus of Refinery 29, and obviously your personal DNA overlaps deeply with that, and culture. So there's a lot of folks out there that like, what does diversity and inclusion bring to my business or to my work, or to maybe you can talk about imprinting your own DNA, and specifically, for other leaders who are listening, like what is, I have a very visceral, very strong reaction to what it's done for me and my business and the people that I get to work with. But I'd love to hear yours. How do you think about that, and what role has your mission played and diversity and inclusion played in the strength of what you've built? Sure.
So, I think for us, as we were building Refinery 29, inclusivity has always played a huge part. Again, like from starting and seeing all these incredible communities within New York that were really diverse in all different ways in terms of their style, race, body type, background, everything. Again, to me, that's such a huge source of strength and beauty and power. The other thing was, as we were creating for a new generation of women. And the millennial generation is the most diverse generation in U.S. history, now superseded by Gen Z. And by 2044, the majority of America will be made of, minorities. So minorities will be the majority. So I think that that's just something that's so important to recognize. For us, it's always been, really pivotal to reflect our audience and our content, to make sure that the content that we create is not just our idea, but is actually something that is meaningful, that reflects the people consuming it back to them. So that's been at the core for a long time. And actually, like to do that it's still not always easy. When we first started, doing original photography, for example, most of the modeling agencies only had, they had majority white models, and they also, it was pretty much all straight size models. So, kind of hiring a model through a modeling agency is the easy way to do it, and it's the way most people do it. But we started doing street casting, and we started making, cards that I would pass out in the, me and our photo editors would pass out in the subway, or we'd go to music festivals and pass them out so that we could start actually reflecting the women reading Refinery 29 or women that looked like them in our content. So I remember, I think it was in 2010 or 11 that we did this idea that we had that was the month of hair. So we wanted to, every day of the month, be talking about hair, but be talking about different kinds of hair. And we wanted that to be the most, diverse representation of hair in terms of style and length and texture. And so, it was like I was out casting at the Madewell store. I went to it was at the gym across the street, and there was this beautiful, Afro-Latina receptionist that had this beautiful head of hair. And so I was like, hey. You please be in this. So, really through doing that, we tried to represent huge range, and what was amazing about it was just that the response that we got, people thanking us for seeing hair like theirs in our content. And it seems like such a small thing, but it's actually really meaningful, and that it was something that was important to us. But I feel like that was a moment where we realized how important it could be to people, and so since then we've really continued to work on focusing on shifting the representation of women, and I think that's on multiple levels. That was my next question. So you're talking about it in terms of hair and fashion, but it presumably operates at so many different levels in the company. Maybe you could touch on a couple of those. Totally. Yeah. I think there was there was just such a gap. I think what was happening in a lot of mainstream media, as I mentioned before, was this narrow lens of what beauty looked like. It was also this limiting lens of what women could be. Even when you think about the proliferation of articles about how to please your man, and not, these publications not really telling women that they have their own power, that their own pleasure is something that is the source of power, that they should be thinking about, men's pleasure, not their own pleasure. I mean, that's like an example of, I think, the thought process that was happening. So
fractured, so messed up.
Yeah, we want to be a catalyst for women to feel, see, and claim their power. That's our mission. And part of that is, we've all heard that expression: if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we try and represent that in all different levels. From when we started doing sex content, we said we're not going to presume the sexual orientation of our audience. We're not going to, we're going to say partner. We're not going to say boyfriend. So little choices like that, but then also really thinking about the photography that we have on site and how we can, represent women through that. So last year we launched this project called the 67% Project, because I think it's also important, in life and in work, to constantly be taking stock and thinking about, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, and checking in and saying, how am I doing, and how is, also culture is always changing. So it's important to say, like, am I where I need to be? So last year we did that exercise. We said, we learned that 67% of women in the US are size 14 and up. And media and advertising only represent them 2% in images. Which is really damaging. If you don't see yourself represented, that teaches you that you should be ashamed of, who you are. And I do think that we have been so, women in particular have been so brainwashed by the imagery that we see and this ideal of beauty that is a falsity.
Yep.
So we're trying to unwind that, and it has been shown that you can start to unwind bias by showing people different images. So if you see a different image, you can start to shift your mindset and your bias.
In fact, it's the only way it really is, right? I mean, if you are aware of it, that's like the first step towards change.
Yes,
is
exactly.
And,
So,
I was familiar with that, the 67% thing, that the 2 to 4%, that was just so shocking. And I think that underpins so many of the things that have made you and Refinery 29 successful, is leaning into those things. You talked about them as little details, and there's an Eames quote that I love, which is, the details aren't the details are the thing.
Yeah, the details are the thing.
Yeah, and when folks are looking to make their mark in the world and make a difference, and if you try and speak to everybody, you end up speaking to nobody. So what can you focus on, and what details can you apply that are uniquely you, or things that you care deeply about?
Yeah.
That's the that ends up being like the differentiator. When I think of Refinery 29, I think like just so in touch with culture.
Thanks.
You guys nailed it.
Thank you. Well, I think, for us, when we learned that stat and we actually looked at our own site, and we've been talking about body positivity, we've been aiming towards inclusivity for years, but actually when we took stock of our own site, we were far behind. We weren't representing 67% of our images, plus size women. Mm-hmm. And we said, what, we need to change this. We need to, we can't just talk about this, we need to actually do it. So we spent months shooting new images and really trying to repicture, because also when you look at, when we looked at what existing images there were, like on stock sites of plus size women, the majority of them, the woman's weight was the subject of the image. So it was a woman like measuring her waist, or a woman standing on a scale. So it wasn't a woman working out, or like getting a coffee, or talking to her friend. It was like all these images of plus size women were just about her weight. So you can kind of infer what that's sort of saying about the image, that this person is not isn't a whole complete person. She's just fixated on her weight because that's abnormal.
And didn't you guys do a project with Getty around?
Yeah.
Can you talk about just small departure for a second? Talk about that, because that's really interesting. In order, you recognize there's a problem, and then then you fixed it, or not fixed
Oh,
it, but
we definitely haven't fixed it, but
to
we're...
be clear, sorry, but in stock photography, you said, let's do something, let's take action.
Yeah.
Can you give us a small departure on how you went about trying to make an impact in that area where you saw a problem?
Yeah, so it was kind of small steps over time, but when we committed ourselves to doing this 67% project, and we're still working towards getting to that consistently representing 67% of our images showing plus size women, reflecting back the reality of America. But as we started banking all these images, creating all these new images to sort of repicture what women look like, I met the director of visual trends at Getty, whose name is Pamela Grossman. She's amazing. She's just someone that I think is so phenomenally interesting and talented. Anyway, so I met her, and we were talking because we are very much like kindred spirits in terms of like wanting to disrupt taboos and challenge convention and repicture the way that women are represented. With the goal of showing women in all of their complete glory, not kind of tokenizing these different elements of women's existence. So we had dinner, and we just were like jiving so hard, and it was like clear that we needed to do. It was clear that we needed to do something together, it was like when we thought about it, it was like, okay, so we can make this change on our own site and our platforms, and ourselves do better at representing women, or we can have a much bigger impact by actually giving these images to anyone in the industry, whether that's in editorial or advertising, and saying, look, you can no longer say that you can't find an awesome image of a plus size woman, because here's all these amazing images. So cool. Have at it, use them. So so
beautifully disruptive and supportive, and I just love action instead of just pointing at a problem and saying this is a problem. Like, what are you going to do to take a role in fixing it? I think that is amazing.
Thank you.
So cool.
I mean, I think that that's something that I think about a lot, and I love hearing examples. Like I always think about, there's a moving company that donates time to helping people that are women who are escaping domestic violence move themselves and their families. And I think about it all the time because I love that, it as an example of like using what your skill is, your calling or your job, and finding the way to kind of tie that to something that you're passionate about changing in the world. And I think for me, that was kind of it feels like my calling in a way, because, I come from a visual photo background. I went to art school, and, was working at a fashion magazine, which was really creative, but, I don't know, in a lot of ways, I guess, still reinforcing sort of, not fully. I do think we were doing a better than average job, but not, it wasn't really moving the needle in the way I wanted to. And it's just been really exciting. And again, to talk about like the window of possibility opening, it's like you do one small thing, you just start going out and passing out these street casting cards, and then over time it builds into like this collaboration with Getty. So I think that's so important to realize, is just make a decision, take the first step, and then make the most of it. I mean, I think that that's like the best, advice I can give, because people can be so daunted about doing something big. Well, that's okay. You don't have to do something big. Just do something small, and then do the next small thing. And then, it kind of is like a breadcrumb trail that leads you somewhere.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
To go back to, I pulled you off track a little bit to go down.
I go off track on my own.
To go down to, but this is like the people at home, this is what they want to hear. They want to hear you. So I'm just trying to provide a couple of guide rails here. And I want to go back to the, not just the 67% thing, but basically a focus on providing perspective. Because, there's so many folks, I said earlier in the interview, like when you try and do something for everybody, you do something for nobody.
Yeah.
How important has focus been? You started out, you guys iterated a little bit. You talked about how You used to be for men and women, and then you've narrowed, and now you're addressing some women in power, gender diversity. Like, how has that focus been a huge positive for you?
Yeah, I think,
or maybe what, I'm framing the question too much. What have been the results of you furthering your focus? Has it been successful, or is it, do you find that it creates rifts in the company or in your audience, or how has it been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've focused in more in some ways, but expanded in a lot of other ways. So I do think when you're starting something, having focus is super important. One, because generally if you're starting something, there's an element of bootstrapping and you don't have a ton of resources. So trying to do too many different things or trying to, appeal to too many different audiences is just going to fragment your time and your energy. And it's better to actually build off of, maybe that you want to go here, but like starting at that small point that feels like where's the most differentiated and interesting place to start.
What can you do with what you got?
Yeah. So yeah, we did start focused on, on men and women, quickly honed in on women. And I think, then we've built on that. We started focused on style and beauty, but also really infusing those with a bigger message. So, sort of like, we're talking about style and beauty, which a lot of people think are superficial, but we're actually showing you that these are, tools for self-expression. We're actually using these as a way to talk about individuality and to celebrate diversity. So started from that place, and then, started to build. We started to say, we were interested in like experimenting in health and sex and seeing if our audience was interested in those things. And we did some small experiments, and it was like the couple of stories we did in that realm like did way better than anything else that we were putting out. We were like, oh wow, like let's lean into this. And we saw that was just something that there was a huge appetite for. Again, I think because we were differentiated in our perspective. We weren't, talking about how to please a man. We were talking about how to please yourself and, get a lot of knowledge that was sort of taboo, and you could only read about it either in like scary medical places or in places that were like winking and you didn't even know what they were saying. So it was using so many like cheeky languages.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, I think as we started to grow, we started to do little experiments and test. I think that's the other thing that's been, so important to how we've grown is not just jumping off the cliff into the, I don't know.
Abyss.
No, thank you. I was like,
what did you
ocean. So not just, not like just launching some crazy huge thing without doing any sort of testing.
Yeah.
We've really done like our model is more to kind of do these little tests, and then we talk a lot about sort of like we'll do like a couple little tests with maybe small stories that don't take a lot of resources, and then if we see a big reaction, then we build it into a short series. If that does amazing, then it's then it builds into something bigger until it's a till it's a full blown thing on its own. But a lot of those little tests don't go anywhere. So I think it's important to stay focused, and if you have other things that you want to try, that's awesome. Just test them out in small ways that don't fracture all of your time and attention.
I love the theme of experimenting, A/B testing and whatever in the web world. And
A/B testing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's a real thing.
But that's a nice little nugget of advice. Any other like tactical pieces of advice? I think I'm trying to, for the folks that are out there that already identify as a creator, they want to start, or they're on their way and they're trying to get the next thing. Like, what advice do you have? Clearly testing small. We've talked about how to transition into that thing.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of good tactical stuff. Other just pieces of advice that I could say, here's what Piera said. Here's the advice. And it's risky, but
advice.
You got to go there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that might sound like an oxymoron, but I think be confidently humble. So for us, knowing what it was that we didn't know and what we needed to learn helped us to grow, helped us to ask for help, helped us to seek out people that could complement and fill in the blanks that we had. I think so often people are scared to admit that they don't know something or scared to be vulnerable, and that can really be an Achilles heel and something that keeps you from growing. So for us, being, I know it does sound like an oxymoron, but knowing confidently what you don't know, knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know,
for sure,
and being confident as you ask for help and advice, because building a business, even if it's in your area that you studied, that you, had a previous job in, there's so many elements that you can't know. I mean, every phase that we get to with our business, I'm like, I don't know how the hell to do this. Like, who am I to take our business to this next level? Like, and you can tell yourself different narratives. Like I could tell, I have told myself in the past, like, you don't know what you're doing. You didn't study business. You went to art school. You're just like an indie kid. So what the hell business do you have, running a company with this many people? Like I can tell myself that narrative, but I also know that, to get to this point, there is no roadmap. Like I think there were points where I was like, I don't have this experience. I don't have the roadmap. Like no one taught me to do this. And like, because there is no roadmap. There is no one that can teach you how to do this thing because you're the one doing it, and it's probably the first time it's been done in this exact way. Yep. So I think, for me, that's been helpful to remember that and realize that and give myself credit and knowing, and also to remember that you're never done growing. That I've had so many times when I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to quit this business because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to take it to that next level. I don't have this exact experience. But that's such a limiting thought. And I think so often we have those limiting thoughts and we listen to ourselves and we stop. We stop out of fear. And remembering that you're never done growing, that we all have the capacity to learn and grow, and that creativity is like boundless, is a really powerful thing to remember.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
I'm just,
No, we could talk
going
forever.
on and on and on.
I'm going to handcuff you to the, we're going to talk for hours, not going anywhere. No. So when, I think, are there tactics that you use? You talked about the story that we tell ourselves. And
what do you mean by tactics?
So are there like,
I'm not great with like.
In the morning when you wake up, I always tell myself 3 nice things about myself. Or like, are there specifically like intentional things you do to maintain like a growth mindset? Or, how do you combat that 3 a.m. voice in the head that says you're not good enough, you haven't done this before? What do you just shut it up? Do you take a shot of tequila and go do it anyway? Like, what's your approach to solving that really prominent?
Tactically?
Yeah, like how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I have self-doubt, first I recognize it. I don't try and push it down. I just say, I'm feeling really depleted. I'm feeling bad about myself. I'm having a lot of self-doubt. And I try and be compassionate to myself and say, okay, maybe right now is not the right time to, do this big thinking thing that you're trying to do because you're not in the right mindset. So try and be a little bit more sympathetic, because I used to kind of have that moment and then spiral, try and, kind of just like continue to spiral into it. And now I try and recognize it and then take a break. Like, okay, this is not the moment to like, engage with this inner dialogue. The other thing that I do that's just very specific is at the end of every day, I write down highlights, I write down a low light, and I write down something I learned or something that was an idea that was percolating. And it's just a nice moment of reflection, but it's also super informative to look back at it because, you get a lot of perspective of, and gratitude for all the different things that are happening. But then when I look at the lowlights, for example, I often, it helps me to recognize patterns and realize things that I need to address or narratives that I'm telling myself that are not helpful. So it's just, I think a lot of self-awareness and taking stock is very helpful in combating those things.
I love it. You talked about creativity being boundless. That's one of my personal missions, is to unlock that. The mission of Creative Live is to unlock that in millions of people all over the world. Tell me about the Peach Pit.
Oh, the Peach Pit.
Yes.
Okay.
Tell us about the Peach Pit.
So the Peach Pit is my office, and I call it the Peach Pit for multiple reasons. One, because it's painted peach color. The other is it's kind of like a cozy environment. And then I'm a child of the 90s, so it's a 90210 reference. But yeah, my office, when I got my own office like 2 years ago. That was the first time I've ever had an office.
Been in business for how many years?
Almost 13, actually.
Okay, amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I got my first office, although it does have a clear glass door because I don't want to be
weird,
totally sectioned off. I get a lot of my energy from people and conversations and stuff. But in the Peach Pit, I do I have like a special kind of brainstorm that I do in there called the Peach Pit Brainstorm. So once a month I have people from all different parts of the company, anyone can sign up, come to the Peach Pit, and it's really a place where I have everyone bring something that they want everyone else's thoughts on. Sometimes people bring, practical challenges that they're having in their function of their job. Sometimes people bring things that they're inspired by that they want to think about how they could bring into their work. But it's super amazing because it does multiple things, and we always start every Peach Pit by we do this improv shakeout. So it's very silly and fun, and it just levels the playing field. It's like, because people are coming from all different teams and levels, and I feel like they might be intimidated, but I also sometimes get intimidated to meet new people. So just kind of like having that warm up.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, it kind of gets you out of your head, into your body. You have to kind of leave your inhibitions at the door because everyone's doing this ridiculous thing. It's like, okay, like we're just all on the same level now. So let's just.
We're all ridiculous.
Yeah, we're all ridiculous.
So
let's
powerful.
Just, inhibitions, goodbye. But yeah, it's a really nice format. I love it because I meet different people, and everyone that's in there meets different people. You get a sense of what other people do and what they're thinking about. And a lot of really awesome ideas have been incubated in there.
Nice.
So it's fun. And
you have a buzzer too. I heard the story about a buzzer.
Yes, I have a crystal bedazzled, or it's like a plastic gemstone, because they're not really crystals. Bedazzled, I think balderdash buzzer.
Amazing.
So and we use that to.
Why do you buzz people?
So, I think in the creative process, actually sometimes, constraints can bring about a huge amount of creativity. But I think in the setting of the Peach Pit, because it's all people from all different parts of the company, not all of whom would identify as a creative, even though everyone is creative. I want to have it be free and open. So the buzzer is if someone talks about budget, they get buzzed. If someone says, oh, well, that's not going to drive a lot of traffic, they get buzzed, because I want it to be a place that is limitless and that people can feel really free and open to express things.
That's such a cool thing.
Thank you.
It's so cool. What was the genesis of the idea?
Well,
did it evolve, or was it just something like, I got this thing, we're going to bring people into my office and we're going to talk creative?
I like taking inspiration from different places and taking things that have moved me in different ways and kind of mashing them together. I like designing my own things and ways of working, and bringing my own unique flavor to them. So it was multiple things. Like one, I took an improv class that really I loved, and I like recommend that everyone take improv because it was just so liberating. It was great for just thinking on your toes, for feeling uninhibited to express yourself. I loved it. But in it, they did this warm up, and I thought it just changed my energy so much, and I could tell it changed the energy of everyone in the room. There was people that were more introverted, that were like nervous to be there. So that, I kind of pulled that. Then I actually just randomly had that buzzer. We didn't actually make it for the Peach Pit, but I had it, and one day I saw it and I just grabbed it and said, we're not gonna limit ourselves in here, and so we started using it. So it's sort of like it kind of evolved naturally.
So cool to embed that ethos of creativity, not just in your space, but in your company, that's anyone can sign up for that. Is this something, would you stand up in front of the company as a core value and talk about creativity? What role does creativity play for you personally and for Refinery 29?
So one of our core values is actually imagination, which I think is interchangeable with creativity. But I think that just continuing to reimagine the way that we do things and the way that people can, there's just so much imagination that's possible in all different aspects and functions, and from office management to accounting to editorial.
That's sorry.
Yeah, maybe
I use that one.
Maybe
too.
not creative accounting, but it's like I think about our HR team and
so much opportunity.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity there to think about how does someone get an offer letter? Does it is it just a form in the mail, or do they get a package that really tells them something about the brand? So that's something I try and embed in our culture, is like that is expressing to people what the values of the brand are, what the mission of the brand is, and then workshopping with different teams how they bring those to life in their work. And it's an amazing process because we recently sat down with our growth team and we walked them through, and they at first they were like, oh well, we don't really drive the brand with our work. And then we did this workshop with them, and by the end they were like, we're hugely influential to the way that we get our brand out there. And they came alive, and they just really could see how they are part of creating something. And I think that to me that's so important, is helping people to understand what the values are and then how they can interpret them. Because to go back to that monolithic creative director or the monolithic founder or CEO or whoever it is, the way that you create an amazing company is through the power of all the different people and giving them the tools and the confidence to really excel in each of their roles. So for me, that's what I'm get really excited about and like geek out on and think about different peach pity type workshops and ways that we can infuse that in people across the company.
So impressive. It's obviously contributed deeply to your growth. I want to talk. There's one more thing I want to address before we're getting close to time here. And I know it's crazy.
Just flown by.
Isn't it crazy?
Yes.
It's 80 minutes.
What?
Yeah. 76 minutes.
I thought we were talking for about 25 minutes.
Crazy, right? Crazy.
Yeah. Time is a construct.
It is. Let's look. Yeah. Hey, believe me, I want to. When you were talking and riffing on creativity right there, and how the growth team at Refinery 29. I find these constrained things in Creative Live, and I try and undo them. And when I travel or speak to other folks, and I see these limiting mindsets, to me, how you unlock them and like the process that's such a focus for you and for the company, I think is an important lesson for people out there, because they see your success and they say, wow, these have hundreds of millions of uniques and they've raised $100 million, and oh my gosh, you guys have made such an impact. Talk to me about 29 rooms. Because to me that seems almost like, but that's not core to our business.
Right.
And you can easily talk about that as is that a KPI, or is that and for those non-business folks out there, these are like how we think about the business and how we drive it, and yet this is something that was wildly creative. So tell us a little bit about it, and then what role it plays in sort of your growth and your brand, and I'm sure people through extension can think about how they could employ that in their own lives.
Yeah. So 29 Rooms is our immersive funhouse of style, culture, and technology. It's something that's hard to describe because it's really unique, but it's we bring to life the ideas and themes that we have in our content in 29 different rooms that we work with 29 different artists and collaborators to bring to life.
In real life.
In real life. So
it's
it's kind of like a fun house meets an art installation, and it's super imaginative and.
And what role does it play for you guys? To me, that's an amazing concept. I've seen it done in hotels that were about to get destroyed.
Yeah.
They bring in some artists and they'll do that. But what role does that exercise, seemingly whimsical, when you have investors and deadlines and and metrics that you need to hit, but yet you've gone off and done this thing that, what role does that play for you and the team and the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we did the first 29 rooms back 2 years ago, and this September we'll be doing our third, and then actually we're expanding from there. But when we first did it, I think if you had looked at it, it might feel like a non sequitur for us. We're a digital media brand, so why are we creating this huge, experiential event? It was a couple of things. So one, it was our 10-year anniversary, so it gave us an opportunity to say, what do we want to do to celebrate 10 years? And we were thinking about the fact that we wanted to do something during New York Fashion Week because our roots as a brand are in style. It's also a time that just already has
or the activations.
Stuff going, buzz around it, and there's cultural awareness. But we want to do something to disrupt that and to also show the fact that for us, style is so much more than what you wear, and that our brand has expanded so far beyond style. And so we also we were thinking back, it's our 10-year anniversary, so we were thinking back to the core values of the company: inclusivity, imagination, impact, and went all the way back to that mall map that I described, and the fact that we started with this digital map of 29 different spaces. So we said, what if we create that in real life, and we bring to life all of the different kind of topics and ideas that we write about into this space.
I love it.
And so we were hugely inspired by a lot of museum installations and immersive, things like fun houses, because we wanted to create a space where was really joyful and fun, and people let their guard down and almost felt childlike. So it opened them up, but then within it also, delve into thought-provoking, deep topics, so that sort of have that emotional arc and kind of create a transformative experience. And for me, what was most gratifying was the first year we did it, and it was a huge risk. It almost didn't happen because it was just very hard to convince people that it was a good idea, because it was something we'd never done before, that we hadn't really seen done before.
Probably kind of expensive relative to some other reach things that you could possibly do.
Exactly. It was an investment. It was a stretch for us to produce it. I still look back at that and I was like, that was a miracle that we did that. But we did it, and it was amazing. It was such a huge, it was like so much more of a success than we even thought it could be on many different levels. just the social reach alone. We brought in amazing brand partners for it. And for me, one of the most gratifying things was just the audience reaction. We had such demand for the experience, and we had people going through and saying, wow, this event made me want to start dreaming bigger, or this event made me feel creative. And I think that was, that's the beauty of it, is that it really does have that transformative effect. And it's like when you take a risk like that, when you create something that is exuberantly creative, that is, inclusive in that way, it's kind of contagious. Like, people leave it and they feel the intention that we put into it, and they take it into their own lives. So the role it's played in our business is multiple fold. One, we created it as a digital brand, but also seeing that our audience was really starting to, we all live in our digital world like this. We started to see our audience was, really interested in experiential events. They wanted to, they were more interested in investing in experiences than in products. So that was, it was multiple fold, but that was sort of a trend that we were seeing. And so now 29 Rooms really functions as our touchstone with our audience, our biggest event of the year, where we can really bring them into our world, give them this, amazing experience and gift, interact with them, and and it's also something that drives press, it drives social reach, just brand awareness, and we work with amazing brands to put it on, so it drives revenue. So it's become this much bigger thing, and it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Like, I really see this being a whole, its whole own world unto itself.
Well, I think the takeaway there is, obviously there's so many things to take away, but what underpins it all is this thing that was a risk that you qualified and quantified. You had this instinct that there was something there, but it was going to be scary and hard and expensive, and you did it anyway. Mm-hmm. And now it's one of the things that sounds like it's a flagship piece of what you built.
It's our most successful franchise. I think there were times when we were, pushing to create 29 Rooms where, there was so much resistance, and I thought, I was there in my mind, I could see it, and the creative team that came up with the idea with me, we all were there, and we were like, this is going to be amazing. We felt it. And that's, it's important to hold on to that feeling, because for me, the creative process is usually thinking, excited, breakthrough, holy shit, I have a great idea, or we have a great idea, and then it kind of goes teeth gnashing, how the hell do we make this thing, resistance, self-doubt, crawling through the grime, and then finally kind of breaking through to the other side. So I think during that crawling through the grime period, it's important to hold on to the vision that you had. And I think it's really helpful with any creative project to really be able to focus on how you describe that and how you really walk someone through the vision very tangibly, because that was a breakthrough moment for us in pitching 29 Rooms. Was we were describing it as this fun house of art and style and culture, and people were like, oh, that sounds cool. But when we started describing it as, you're going to show up at this Brooklyn warehouse and you're not going to quite know where you are, but then when you walk inside, they're going to go through a glitter lips doorway, through a lipstick mirror maze, and then into a VR room where you can travel to 3 different cities. Then people were like, whoa, that sounds cool. I want to experience that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that can be really helpful when you're pitching out an idea, is to really put yourself in the shoes of the other person and try and make it easy for them to transport themselves there, to help them get there. Because I've found that in my own, is sometimes I have this idea, and I'm trying to explain it, but I don't have, if you don't have a good articulation that is kind of this is going to sound harsh, but idiot proof, make it something that everyone can understand. That can really help kind of get an idea through.
At the core of that is storytelling.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm
Totally.
also, so many people I've sat next to, creating a narrative around something, especially if you're selling an idea, you can be wildly creative, but the ability to package it and get people to buy into your ideas is every bit as important as the most wild creative or creative ideas.
More important most of the time.
Tell me about that. Just like that, we'll end on that because I know that this is an important piece. How important is it to be able to package your creative ideas?
I think being able to package your creative ideas and make it so anyone can understand them is, completely invaluable, because otherwise you're kind of just the lone, this like lone wolf, Imagineer with all these ideas, but you risk kind of being isolated and not having people buy in, which can be really something that is very isolating.
Yeah, and self-defeating and all that.
And some people need help with that.
Yeah.
Not everyone is, because the idea can be so in your head. Sometimes you need to sit with someone and say, like I tell a lot of creatives on our team to do that. Like I say, okay, but just go and show this to someone in a totally different team and make sure that they get it.
Crazy.
That they, sometimes it's if we're designing something, just make it's like how you user test.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. You don't have to be totally responsible all on your own for packaging. It's good to have friends and loved ones and co-workers that can help bounce things off of, but knowing how to encapsulate your idea in a way that people can understand it will help you to get buy-in, to get funding, to get people on board with what you want to create, because it's really hard to go it alone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll see you again probably tomorrow.
Bye, 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 all you cameras.
Thank you.
Thank you.